I'm a monstrosity. The kind of horrendous figure children fear seeing in their closets and under their beds at night. People tell stories about creatures like me around the campfire. All sorts of myths and legends about snatching up unsuspecting victims and consuming the souls of the innocent. I'll tell you now, that couldn't be further from the truth. I am a cryptid, yes. But instead of being the thing that stalks you on the sidewalk at night when you're out walking alone, I'm the force that protects you, keeping you safe and making sure threats from the darker parts of the universe don't leak into this fragile planet. Of course, I'm not successful every time. Plenty of things slip through the cracks. Seeing as you humans all seem to share your tales of encounters with things that don't follow the natural law. But I can assure you, it would be far worse if I wasn't around. I wasn't born human. In fact, I really didn't have much of a birth to begin with. I only remember floating around in a tank of some sort for a small period of time, before being deployed out on the field my first time. When there's a threat the police, the FBI, or even the military can't understand or take care of, by use of conventional means, that's where I come in. I deal with the things your species cannot. That's my purpose, my drive, and what I was created to do. Over the decades, I've been sent to either kill or capture everything from sinister spirits to elongated humanoids, whether they reside in national forests or in the local neighborhoods of their unfortunate victims. I take it that you're all curious as to my appearance, my abilities, and what it is that I use to sustain myself. Things along those lines. My height caps out at 8 feet tall. My skin is a midnight blue, with a slight shine at the edges of my joints. As far as my eyes go, they are simply a pair of yellow glowing light bulb shaped dots, which aid me in seeing in the dark. I possess claws about 4 inches long, razor sharp and strong enough to slice through most metal. They have a blue color similar to that of my skin, to help me blend in with an array of environments better. Around July of 2011, I was deployed out into White's Mountain National Forest. There had been reports of some sort of creature snatching up campers and hikers in the night. There were 12 victims of the supposed cryptid. Only one had survived. He told his story to the police. They had taken his information down and then had secretly passed it on to us. When they had brought him in to chat, a couple of agents had the man describe the cryptid in question, after which they executed the man, not wanting him to get his story out there, and add to the panic already being ensued by all these sightings of otherworldly beings. The thing is, the guy had known too much. He had gotten multiple good looks at the thing before he had escaped. You should have seen the look on the director of operations' face while the guy described the thing in near perfect detail. But his terror had caused him to stutter and lose track of his thoughts multiple times over. They had gotten all the information out of him that they could. I was going to be honest. His treatment by the agents was pretty humane and decent seeming, and by their standards anyway, all the way up to them blowing his brains out. Still, a much more merciful death compared to what I had seen in the past. It wasn't long after that I and a team of agents had been deployed to go take the thing down, now that we knew where it was hiding and hunting, as well as what it looked like. I had no view of the scenery on the way there. I was transported inside a sealed-up reinforced truck. It was more or less meant to hide my appearance from the public rather than keep me contained. I'm fed and taken care of well. I see no reason to betray the agency, despite what you may think. They dropped me off at the edge of the forest. The place had been closed off in order to keep anyone from witnessing what was about to go down. Several men geared up with night vision goggles, fully loaded rifles, and covered head to toe in body armor. They all walked along the trail deeper into the forest. marching carefully in a military formation as they looked around. I crawled up on the tree on all fours and moved from above, jumping from branch to branch to see if I could spot anything from the vantage point. I hissed and sniffed the air, trying to detect the creature's scent, but to no avail. Usually this method had always worked, but this cryptid knew how to mask his scent well. It was one of the more intelligent beings that I had encountered over the decades. The agents below were getting tense during the hike. They too could sense something wrong. I could hear the intensity of their breathing beginning to increase, even underneath their masks. "Where is this thing at?" one complained. "We've been out here for an hour now." I ignored him and led the way, crawling down from the trees above and back onto the ground. I stood up in a bipedal fashion, letting myself tower over the agents as they looked up at me. "Well, what about you, freak?" The one closest to the front spoke up. "You sense anything?" I brushed his comment off. I was more than used to always getting ridiculed for my appearance. It was nothing new. I considered it worth it when they fed me so well. I got down on all fours and crawled around through some of the shrubbery off the path, doing everything in my power to use stealth and swiftness while being careful about my surroundings. It was only when I had gotten a couple hundred feet away from the rest of the squad that I had picked up the smell of blood, a lot of it. I winced slightly from how hard the scent had hit me, especially with how powerful my nose is at picking that stuff up. I turned and dashed back over to the squad and informed them that I had picked up a scent, to which they became uneasy, their discomfort only becoming stronger. "What is it?" one asked. "Blood," I replied simply, my voice echoing off the trees surrounding us. The squad followed behind me as I led them in the direction of the smell, keeping their guns trained on the area around them with every step they took. A few of them even complained about the smell once they were in range to detect it. "Jesus, that's pungent," one cried. There was a dreadful silence that had accompanied our march. No rustling of trees, no dislodgement of rocks, and even no wind. When things were this quiet, it usually meant something was nearby. Something not human or animal. I kept a lookout through the tree line. My vision was excellent in the nighttime, which made it all the more unsettling when even I couldn't spot anything. But that same stench continued to flood my nostrils. "Keep your heads up, man," said one of the squad members. "Things could get ugly fast." And then I felt it. Something was moving below me. I could feel its vibrations bouncing off the bottom of my feet. The creature was underground, and it was pressing forward in a slithering-like motion. It felt like there were multiple of them, not just one. I turned around to signal to the squad something was coming, but before they could comprehend what I was attempting to tell them, a pair of long, yellow-colored tentacles burst up from the soil, grabbing two of the agents and wrapping around them. "Fire!" A few squad members shouted simultaneously, attempting to bring the thing down. The forest was now filled with the sounds of gunfire and agonizing screams of terror. The men in the clutches of the tentacles kicked and fought for their lives, but it was useless. I lunged at the pair of tentacles and slashed at one of them with my claws, trying to cut them off in order to save the man that had been grabbed. A yellow pus spilled out from the disgusting limb each time that I swiped at it, causing the creature to screech inhumanely. Once I had taken out the first tentacle, the agent who had been grabbed was dropped to the ground in a lifeless fashion. He had died from suffocation, his eyes bulging out of his skull while his mouth was ajar from his howls of pain. Those of us who remained turned our attention to the second tentacle, but this time the creature had changed up its strategy, using the squad member in its grasp as a human battering ram to swat away the other agents, hitting them away like it was nothing more than a game of baseball. They were all knocked on their backs, sent into trees and thrashed around, all of them lying on the ground coughing and choking as they groaned from the bruises. I attacked the tentacle as best as I could. Avoiding 2 swings and being mere inches away from getting clobbered by a third, I slashed at the bottom of the limb. The pus leaked out into the soil and seeped underground. The agent in this tentacle's grasp had fared even worse than the first. Not only had he been brutally asphyxiated, but his neck was horribly disfigured and broken from all the blows that he had been used to carry out. The other squad members attempted to get to their feet and raise their guns. Several more tentacles had crashed upwards through the ground and grabbed them. This creature was far from done with us. A couple of the agents fired their guns in an unhinged and desperate manner, as a futile effort to escape the cryptid's grasp. When I attempted to get down on all fours and crawl towards the men to help, I too was grabbed by both my legs, being pulled back before also having my arms restricted. I couldn't move or do anything. I tried to retract my claws to slice up the tentacles holding me back, but it was no use. I was completely restrained. A deep, booming voice then evaded its way into my eardrums. It sounded like it was coming from all directions at once, as if it were above ground instead of below. "You shall watch," it demanded, making its bone-chilling intentions clear. All of the agents who had been grabbed were not just simply having their airflow restricted this time. They were being torn apart. Their screams, God, their screams. It wasn't like anything I had ever heard before, even from other strange creatures. Right in front of my eyes, they were pulled apart like cotton candy. Blood stained the trees, dirt, and bushes. The smell of copper was overwhelming me as they were dismembered, only adding to what had been there before. Bones cracked, joints snapped, and multiple screams were suddenly cut short as they died, once again leaving us in the eerie silence of the forest. When the deeply unsettling display of the creature's power and relentlessness had ended, it had tightened its grip around me, making sure to keep me in place as I looked at the sights of all the deceased agents. Not a single one had survived. It was just me. I was all alone now with this beast. "These humans," that same commanding voice from earlier said, "they are nothing. A mere inconvenience to you and I. They will throw you out, treat you like you are of no value, and yet you held them like the fool you are. Why is that? You have all this power, knowledge of the things that they do not. You could slit their throats and snap their bones in an instant, but you allow them to order you around as if you are a puppet, when really, they should be yours." "Let me go," I replied slowly. "I beg of you to join me. Why do you think I didn't kill you? I wanted you to see that you do not belong to them. A being like you was meant to roam free, to be feared. I want them to bow to us, for them to give up their freedom as a desperate attempt to keep us from slaughtering them and everything they hold dear. I protect them, I serve them, they feed me," I growled, trying to sound confident in my response. "What? Scraps? That sustenance is only there to keep you from getting a taste of their flesh so you don't turn on them. They will never truly care about you. You are the material of a king, but continue to play the role of a pawn. You stand in a room surrounded by them, being docile for their sake, instead of tearing the skin off their bones and demonstrating you are the superior being." I jerked around and shaked as much as I could to escape the creature's grasp, before an idea popped into my head. I was out of options and in a really bad spot. Fighting right now will only end in my death and the death of many others. I needed to approach this with caution and intelligence. "Fine, I will join you. I have grown tired of being their pet. I want to be far more," I announced in the most sincere tone that I could muster. The cryptid went silent, attempting to contemplate my statement and decide if I was telling the truth. "Why the sudden change of heart?" it asked suspiciously. I have looked back on my existence. I have seen what they truly want from me now that I rethink everything they have said and done to me. I am nothing but an experiment to them. I mean to carry out the things those cowards can't hope to." The creature began to laugh, clearly amused by my passionate lie. I couldn't tell whether he was buying it or not. I could feel myself tensing with every passing second. He began to speak again, this time much less forcefully. "We belong out here, not in those prisons. No matter how much they pass it off as sanctuary, they're nothing but torture chambers to keep us and our true power locked up. They know what we can do. Why do you think those in power try to hide our existence from the rest? They fear the damage that we can cause, not only to their frail skeletons, but to their minds. They want to keep us reserved to their nightmares, their dark tales and their fantasies in order to feel safe, to have a sense of control, a level of control they will never have in their short, mortal lives." And then, between these sets of tentacles, a large bulge began to form in the dirt. He was now coming out of the ground. The soil, stones, and bushes had been forced out of their spots by the huge mass digging its way up to the surface. Once the massive figure had emerged from below, and all the dirt had fallen off of it, it revealed its hideous and demonic appearance. He made even the most horrendous of entities seem beautiful by comparison. It was the body of the creature. I could make out the shape of its remaining tentacles that were connected to the sides of its torso, if that's what you could even call it anyway. His bizarre-looking head was the shape of a cylinder. His body itself only stood about 8 feet tall, while his tentacles seemed to reach a freakishly long 20 feet in front of him. The being possessed no sort of eyes, not ones that I could distinguish or see, but his mouth was a rectangular shape, very thin but filled to the brim with dull, square-shaped teeth, most of which were chipped and damaged. His legs were laughably small compared to the rest of him, especially his other limbs. His body was a urine-like yellow color, like his tentacles. The ones that he had used to restrain me soon loosened their grip and freed me. We both stood our ground apart from each other for a moment, waiting for the other to make any sudden movements or try anything funny. "This is your chance," he began another monologue. "Go be free. Feast on whatever it is you desire. You are no longer under the command, nor do you have to bend to their will. Now, you can make them bend to yours. Their abilities are nothing in comparison to ours. They invent technology and weapons to assist them, but it's no use. Everything they create will always be useless in their battle against us." I stood up on 2 legs, locking eyes with the creature. "Do you even have a name?" he asked, and to which I gave no response and slowly walked over to him, little by little, keeping my true intentions hidden. He chuckled, not moving or standing back in the slightest. He displayed no signs of fear for me. "Don't you want to be what you truly are? To explore what makes you better than them? You have to show them that you are a force to be reckoned with, not some glorified attack dog." He continued on. I edged myself closer, giving him a convincing grin to emote at his proposals, doing everything I could to make it seem like I was picking up what he was putting down. Just when I was close enough to attack, he returned my smile with an even more sinister smirk of his own, allowing all of his broken and disfigured teeth to show themselves. Disgusting is a gross understatement for his appearance. I lunged forward and wrapped myself around his head, sinking my claws and teeth into his scaly, rubbery skin. That same runny yellow pus oozed out from his wounds as I clawed and bit him. His screams were powerful enough to shake the foundation of a skyscraper. He thrashed his body and used his tentacles to grab me in a final desperate attempt at survival as his life force drained itself from him. A tentacle wrapped around my torso and I was thrown hard enough to go smashing right through the trunk of an oak tree, doing multiple somersaults backwards as I tumbled along the ground. I quickly got back up on all fours, readying myself for an attack that never came. The cryptid screams were now beginning to fade. He dropped to his knees as his tentacles continued to throw themselves wildly around the area, nearly clipping me in the process. I latched onto one of the trees and ran up to the top, watching his dramatic death come to an end. Even though he had no eyes, he spent his last few seconds of life glaring at me with a damning expression, telling me that I would soon meet him in hell and pay for what I had done. His final movements were weak, insignificant, and inconsequential. The trees around me shook as he fell back and took his seemingly final breath. I gave myself a few moments to decide if it was safe, and then cautiously crawled my way back down to the ground, listening for any signs of his breathing or being alive. I poked at one of his connected tentacles. There was no movement or any sort of reaction, so I then made my way over to his body to inspect it. Only when I saw it again did it occur to me how much damage I had actually done. The pierce wounds from my claws and teeth had torn away most of the flesh from the top of his head. Some of the tissue near his mouth had been peeled off, as well as his alien-looking brain being exposed at the top of his head. I was now out here stranded alone with no sorts of backup. All the agents were dead and communication systems were destroyed. I didn't know how to get back to the base, seeing as I had been prevented from glimpsing at my surroundings during the trip. A feeling of hunger began to overcome me. It had been quite a bit since I had last fed. I saw no other choice and came to the conclusion of what needed to be done. I knelt down and began to feed on the corpse of the monster, making quick work of his skin and picking off everything I could from his bones. In the middle of feasting, I had figured I should speed up. I didn't want anyone who would have potentially been in the forest to come check out all the commotion and see me. Despite the fact we the agency ordered the government to close the place up prior to this disaster of a mission. I had finished up my meal and stood on two legs, looking around for any signs of life, anyone or anything that could have been watching me. I had figured the agency would come and send more men once they had realized we hadn't returned on the scheduled time. But in the back of my mind, I didn't want that to be the case. The things that entity said were hard to get out of my thoughts. I looked out into the forest, seeing all sorts of wildlife and, most importantly, freedom. Something I had never experienced before. If that thing had been right about something, it was that I should embrace what I am. I still didn't hate humanity, but rather I wanted to be able to make more of my own choices and decisions, to eat whatever I wanted, to roam wherever I please, not having to carry the burden of working for someone else. I contemplated for I'm not sure how long. I know they would come looking for me when they found out. That much was obvious. So, if I was going to get out of here, I needed to do it now and be quick about it. I couldn't ever come back. They would more than likely kill me if I did, or try to anyway. I turned around, giving one last glance to all the death and destruction behind me, before getting down on all fours and running off into the forest. I know what I truly am. I am a creature of the night, the thing your children fear to see under their beds. The monstrosity you feel watching you from behind you as you walk alone at the late hours of the night. Heed this warning. Do not come looking for me. Do not try to capture, kill, or disturb me. I promise it will not end well for you. Leave me be. I am what I am. Nothing and no one can change that now.